Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Crossover U College Hoops Talk podcast, which you can find, as always, right here on the Crossover channel. My name is Kanaye Tesoro, and there's been a lot going on in terms of players withdrawing their names from the NBA draft, finding new destinations to play at this upcoming season in college basketball. And I think the person that's best to start with is probably Darrion Williams, who me and Josh both talked about on last week's episode, for quite a while, just in terms of what we felt was probably going to be the best decision for him to make. I've already put out my personal beliefs that I think he should have returned to College One and stuck it out with Texas Tech, ran it back for another year with JT Top and make some noise in the Big 12. Playing alongside what could end up being the National Player of the Year, like I just mentioned, in JT Toppin. Of course, that's not what ended up happening if you follow college basketball pages on social media. Darrion Williams last week, I forget when, it actually might have been right after me and Josh finished recording that episode we put up last week. But Darrion Williams committed to NC State to join Will Wade and that Wolfpack program. I actually do like the move quite a lot. Do I think it was the best thing for him to do? Again, I very much felt he probably should have stuck it out Texas Tech, but I do like the fit that Darrion Williams is going to provide this NC State program going to next year, and I do think Will Wade's done a really great job in building this roster for this upcoming season. So I'm going to talk about that in this episode today. But before we get into that, if you like this podcast or anything else you see on this channel, please engage with our content in any way you can, whether it's liking our videos, subscribing to our channel, or just telling other people about it. It really does help with being able to push these videos out to a larger audience. So let's get right into it. Darrion Williams is one of the most sought after transfers in this offseason portal cycle. Of course, there was the period of time where he was considering going to the NBA, tested the draft waters, went to the combine, but of course, considering where we are right now, he decided to pull his name out. I just don't think he was getting the feedback that he probably wanted, and just to turn down the number that he would have been getting if he were to return to school, it was just too much to turn down. I definitely think he's more than likely making upwards of $2 to $3 million. It's probably well worth it when you consider the market of guys of his caliber in college basketball right now. He's a guy who averaged 15 points a game last year, 5.5 rebounds, 3.6 assists. He has a really great all around game. He plays out of the three, the four spot. He did a really good job last year playing on the wing for Texas Tech. He was able to get up and down in transition, step out hit. He can hit the three. While I will say I do want to see a little bit more consistency in his ability to knock down threes on a, like I just said, consistent basis. He shot around, just got to double check, 34% from three this past year, as opposed to the year prior where he shot 45, nearly 46% from three. So definitely would like to see him try to get back to those numbers from 2 years ago. He also shot 43% from the field, almost 44, as opposed to near 50%, which he shot the year prior to that as well. So again, I just think you look for him to get trend back towards being more of that efficient player that we saw uh, before this past year. But of course, he was in a bigger role. He was getting a lot more tougher looks this past year at Texas Tech. And I think that's probably some aspects of his play that you can attribute to his drop in efficiency. But again, I think he's going to be really good for NC State. I do really like the fit with him and Will Wade. I definitely think he's going to fit a lot of what NC State and Will Wade's system calls for, both offensively, defensively. He's a big, talented wing. I mean, 6'6", 210 pounds. Like I just talked about, he can get up and down the floor in transition. He has a really solid ball handle for someone of his size and playing out of that kind of 3-4 spot. And again, he can step out and hit the three when he needs to. He's a solid defender. Definitely brings some playmaking too on the offensive side of the ball. And when you combine that with the other guys who NC State has added in this offseason cycle, I really do think NC State has a chance to be a preseason top 15 type of a team, potentially top 10, depending on who you ask. I personally don't have them top 10 right now, but who knows with what could potentially come out about in terms of off-season practice videos or other news, or maybe guys making leaps, and that might influence me to push them closer to my top 10. Right now, I probably have them in the 15 to 20 range. But again, like I just talked about, that could all change pending news about guys making big leaps that maybe weren't necessarily expected. And I definitely do feel like it's one of those cases where I kind of got to see it to really believe. But again, on paper, this team looks really good. They added the guy who this video is about, Darrion Williams. On top of that, you had Terrence Arsenault, who has a lot of upside coming from a Houston program where he probably didn't get the minutes I would have liked to see him get. But of course, that Houston team was really, really good and very experienced, and Terrence just didn't have the experience in college that the rest of the guys on that in that Cougars program had. And I definitely think Kelvin Sampson mentioned about how much it hurt to see Terrence leave the program. And like I just talked about, he's a guy with a lot of upside, a lot of untapped potential, just considering we haven't seen him play all too much just yet in his college career. And I think now that he's going to be in a bigger role, playing out of the two, the three spot, depending on how NC State manages their lineup, then he has a chance to really break out and be a star in college basketball next year. Most definitely. I definitely think he's a guy with pro potential. And that goes for Darrion Williams, too. Just because he's pulling his name out of the NBA this year does not mean he can't be an NBA draft pick the next draft, following next college season. But again, like I just talked about, Terrence, a lot of upside there, a lot of potential. I'm really excited to see how he plays in a bigger role. On top of that, they added Trey Holloman from Michigan State. My mistake there. He's a guy who, again, played really important point guard minutes off the bench, starting at times for Michigan State, back and forth between that. And he did a lot in terms of helping that Michigan State program go on the run that they did in the NCAA tournament. So, I mean, when you put all this together, I got to say, I really do like the way this NC State team is shaping out. And I got to say, Will Wade's done a really, really good job in building this roster for next year. And it's definitely getting to a point where I definitely think the research triangle could be the most competitive that we've seen it in a long time, just between NC State, of course, Duke, and North Carolina, which we'll see what ends up happening with North Carolina. I'm definitely much higher both on NC State and Duke than I am UNC right now, but that's, of course, subject to change. I do like how Hubert Davis has constructed this roster going into the next season as opposed to what he did going into this past season. But again, I would definitely stack both Will Wade and John Shire's rosters ahead of Hubert Davis's going to next year. But again, I think that pretty much takes care of everything I have for this episode on Darrion Williams today. I think it was a really, really important get for Will Wade. He's a guy who I believe was a top 5 rated transfer at this point in the transfer portal cycle. And I think he's a really good player. I think he's going to have a career year across the board stats wise, and he's going to be in a bigger leadership role now that he's not going to be playing second fiddle to JT Toppin anymore. He'll probably be kind of the number one option on the NC State team, and I'm really excited to see how they play in year one. And I know that I'm going to make a video about PJ Haggerty and his commitment to K State, but Darrion Williams coming to NC State kind of pushed PJ Haggerty to maybe look elsewhere. NC State was no longer interested in PJ, which you kind of understand, just considering Darrion's probably going to be the number one option going into next year. And Will Wade's not done either. I've heard rumors that he's looking at Van Allen Lubin from UNC, who I just talked about, and that would, I think, be a pretty solid depth add to get. He might even crack that starting lineup next year for this Wolfpack program. But again, I think that takes care of everything I have on Darrion Williams and his commitment to NC State. Again, I really like the fit here. I think he's going to play great for Will Wade, and I'm really excited to see how Will Wade does in year one. But until next episode, I'll see you all next time.